Daniel Rowe was 38 years old when his wife disappeared for 2 hours at her company party, and he did not go looking for her. He had been married to Cassandra Rowe for 9 years. For 9 years, he had driven her to work on mornings when her car was in the shop, stayed up waiting on nights when her team dinners ran long, and taken every Friday off during the 3 years she was climbing toward her director title so he could be home when their daughter Lily got off the school bus. He was a civil engineer at a municipal infrastructure firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. He drove a 2015 Ford F-150 with 141,000 miles on it and a dent in the rear quarter panel from a job site he had backed into 6 years ago and never gotten around to fixing. He coached Lily's Saturday soccer team. He made his own lunch every morning and rarely talked about himself at parties. What he did not do, for 119 minutes at the Harrington Group's annual gala, was wonder where his wife was. He already knew. He had known for 6 weeks. He had the photographs. He had the hotel receipts. He had the texts, recovered from a backup he had not been supposed to find, in which Cassandra had written to a man named Garrett Hollis, her boss's deputy. A man with a leased BMW and a confidence that Daniel had always found slightly oversized for the room. The sentence that had settled into Daniel's chest like a stone and stayed there: he never notices anything. He's just furniture. What Garrett Hollis did not know was that Daniel Rowe had spent the previous 4 weeks building a case that would rearrange every corner of their shared life, and that the woman Garrett believed was available was about to cost him his marriage, his career, and the professional reputation he had spent 6 years constructing with borrowed confidence and other people's goodwill. What neither of them knew was that the call that would start the whole unraveling would come not from Daniel, but from Garrett's own wife, at 9:17 the following morning. While Cassandra was still asleep and the gala was still settling into memory like something that had gone wrong in a dream. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:44 a.m. on a Thursday in March, and Daniel was already in the kitchen. He had been up since 5. That had been his pattern for the past 6 weeks, waking before the alarm, lying still for a few minutes in the gray dark of the master bedroom, listening to Cassandra breathe beside him with the same steady rhythm she had always had, unchanged, unaware, and then getting up quietly, because that was what he did, and because the kitchen was the only room in the house where he could think without thinking about her. He moved through it by muscle memory: the kettle, the grinder, the pour-over cone he had bought 5 years ago at a kitchen shop, and which Cassandra had called excessive for a Thursday morning, the particular slow circle of the water over the grounds. 2 mugs on the counter by force of habit. Then, one put back. He made his coffee black. He stood at the kitchen window and watched the cul-de-sac come into shape in the early light. The neighbors' cars gleaming with overnight dew, the oak tree at the end of the street beginning to show the first pale suggestion of spring leaves at its highest branches. A house finch landed on the fence post by the side yard, sat for a moment, and left. The street was entirely still. Lily's backpack was by the door, where he had packed it the night before. Purple canvas with a small embroidered soccer ball patch she had sewn on herself with his help 2 months ago, the 2 of them kneeling on the living room floor, the needle threaded wrong 3 times before they got it right. Lily's tongue at the corner of her lip the way it went when she was concentrating hard. She had chosen the purple thread. She had been very specific about the purple thread. He made her lunch at 6:10. Turkey on wheat, no mustard. The crusts cut on the diagonal, because she said diagonal sandwiches tasted better, and he had never seen a compelling reason to argue the point. A small bag of grapes, washed and dried. a juice box, a folded note in the side pocket. He had written her a note every school day for 3 years. Something small, sometimes a drawing of a stick figure attempting something unlikely. Sometimes a joke from a book of kids' riddles he kept in the kitchen drawer. He had not missed a day. He did not plan to. He set the lunchbox beside the backpack. He refilled his coffee. He sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and reviewed the list he had been maintaining for the past 4 weeks in precise, small handwriting, items crossed off in single horizontal lines, new items added in the margins. He was methodical about the list. He was methodical about everything. Daniel Rowe had been a civil engineer for 15 years. He had spent those 15 years solving the problems that most people did not want to think about. The drainage and load tolerance and structural logic that kept roads from failing and bridges from shifting, and the invisible systems underneath cities from collapsing under the weight of everything above them. He was good at his work in the specific, undramatic way of someone who has the patience to follow a problem all the way to its source and does not need anyone to notice him doing it. His supervisor at the municipal firm had described him, at a performance review 2 years ago, as the most methodical person he had ever managed. He had meant it as a compliment. Daniel had accepted it as one. The methodology transferred. He applied it to everything he undertook. The deck he had built at the back of the house over a single summer, framed, sunk in concrete, finished before Cassandra came back from Singapore, had been preceded by 6 weeks of plans on graph paper, materials lists, and a structural calculation he had checked 3 times before he cut the first board. The bathroom he had retiled the previous winter had started with a detailed diagram of the existing layout, an assessment of what could be salvaged and what needed replacing, and a shopping list organized by the sequence in which materials would be needed. He did not begin things he could not finish. He did not finish things he had not begun correctly. He had applied the same standard to what he had found in February. The backup server had been his idea 3 years earlier, installed after Cassandra dropped her phone in a hotel pool during a work trip to Savannah, and they had lost 4 months of photos. Lily's birthday, a beach weekend, Thanksgiving in their first house. He had set up a local network drive with an automatic cloud sync, configured it over a weekend, and shown Cassandra where the backup folder lived in her phone settings. She had nodded and not thought about it again. She had never updated the sync settings. The server had kept running. He had not been looking for anything when he found it. That was the part he kept returning to in the first weeks, the sheer accidentalness of it. The way the universe had arranged a Sunday afternoon in February so that he was in his home office looking for a photograph from 2 years ago. A specific image of Lily's first soccer practice that he wanted to print and frame for her room, and had opened the wrong folder on the server, the phone backup folder rather than the photo archive, and found himself looking at a message thread he had not been meant to see. He had almost closed it. His hand was on the mouse. He had almost gone back to the photo archive and kept looking for the soccer practice picture and gone on with his Sunday. He did not close it. He sat in the home office with the door closed and Lily watching a movie in the living room and read 4 months of recovered messages in 2 hours and 20 minutes. The thread had 847 messages. He read every one. When he finished, he closed the laptop. He sat without moving. The movie in the other room had ended and another had started. He could tell by the change in the music. Something more energetic, Lily humming along to a title song. He listened to that for a while. He looked at the wall of the home office, at the framed photograph of the 3 of them at the beach 2 summers ago, Lily between them in the water, laughing at something, all of them squinting into the sun. He opened the laptop again. He opened a new folder. He began building the file. By the end of February, The folder contained a complete export of all recovered messages, organized by date, with notations cross-referencing each exchange against Cassandra's stated whereabouts at the time it was sent. He had gone back through the joint credit card statements for 6 months and identified 6 separate charges he did not recognize. All at the same Marriott 15 minutes from the Harrington Group's offices, all on Tuesday evenings, all between $189 and $247. He had noted the dates. He had cross-referenced them against his own calendar. He had been out of town on 3 of the 6 Tuesdays. The other 3, he had been home, making Lily's dinner, helping her with homework, assuming Cassandra was working late. He called a private investigator named Ray Colton in the 3rd week of February. Ray had been recommended by a colleague, a man named Marcus who worked in the county permitting office and who had gone through his own version of this 2 years earlier, and who, when Daniel had called him at 8:30 in the evening on a Tuesday and said he needed someone, had given him the number without asking unnecessary questions. Ray Colton was licensed, experienced, and had a quality Daniel recognized and appreciated. He did not editorialize. He was given the assignment, he executed it, and he delivered documentation. 31 photographs over 2 weeks in March, time-stamped, authenticated, chain of custody documented. Entry and exit times, license plate numbers, clear faces. Ray delivered the file on a Wednesday afternoon in a manila envelope that Daniel put directly into the folder without opening at the kitchen table, carrying it to the home office and going through it there, alone, the door closed, the house quiet. The man in the photographs was Garrett Hollis, 41 years old, Deputy Director of Strategy at the Harrington Group. Daniel had met him twice at Harrington events in the previous 2 years. He had a firm handshake and the kind of easy projecting confidence that Daniel had registered without particularly examining. He drove a leased BMW 5 Series that he always parked in the most visible spot in any parking lot. He had an EMBA from Georgetown and had not gone 3 consecutive sentences in either conversation Daniel could recall without referencing it. He had a wife, Patricia Hollis, 2 children, both in elementary school, a house in Ballantyne, a life assembled with the same effort that Daniel had assembled his own, by a different woman who had also not expected to be where she was going to be very shortly. Daniel had thought about Patricia Hollis for several days before he decided. It was not a comfortable set of thoughts. She did not know. She was going to have to. The only question was from whom and in what order. He made the decision he made. He kept building the file. His brother Marcus, not the colleague, his actual brother, younger by 3 years. A facilities manager in Concord who had been married 11 years to the same woman and who was, as he had always been, the person Daniel called when something needed to be said out loud, came by on a Saturday in early March while Lily was at a sleepover and Cassandra was working at the office. They sat on the back deck with beers. Daniel laid it out. He did not rush through it, and he did not dramatize it. He stated it. The way you state the findings of an assessment. Here is what I found. Here is what it means. Here is what I intend to do. Marcus listened all the way through without interrupting. When Daniel finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He set his beer down. He said, very quietly, I want to drive over to that guy's office right now. Daniel said, I know. Marcus said, 9 years. Daniel said, I know. Marcus said, Lily. Daniel said, I know. That's why this has to be done correctly. All the way correctly. No shortcuts. Marcus looked at him. He said, you've had this for how long? Daniel said, 3 weeks. Marcus shook his head slowly. He said, and you haven't? Daniel said, no. Marcus said, how? Daniel thought about how. He said, Because Lily needs me to be the person she is going to need me to be when this is done, and that requires not doing anything I'm going to have to explain away afterward. Marcus looked at the yard. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" Daniel said, "I need you to know, and I need you to be the one who takes Lily if I need you to without notice on short timing." Marcus said, "Done. Whatever you need." Whenever, Daniel picked up his beer. He said, "I have a meeting with an attorney on Friday." Marcus said, "Good attorney?" Daniel said, "Best I could find." Marcus nodded. He picked up his beer. They sat on the deck for another hour and talked about other things. Marcus's son's baseball season, a water main project Daniel was managing for the county, the oak tree at the end of the cul-de-sac that needed a trim. The things they always talked about. The constants that did not change regardless of what else was happening. When Marcus left that evening, he stopped in the doorway and looked at his brother and said, "You all right?" Daniel said, "I'm all right." Marcus said, "I know." He paused. "But you don't have to be." Daniel said, "I'll be what Lily needs me to be. That's the same thing right now." Marcus left. Daniel locked the door, cleaned up the deck, and went inside and reviewed the file until Cassandra came home. The Harrington Group's annual spring gala was held on a Friday evening in the third week of March at the Ballantine Hotel Ballroom, a space with high ceilings and white-clothed round tables, and a lighting design calibrated to make everyone look better rested and more important than they were. Cassandra had attended every year for 6 years. Daniel had come to 3 of them, the first 2, and this one. He dressed carefully. Dark navy suit he had pressed himself that afternoon in the bedroom while Cassandra was getting her hair done somewhere. His good Oxfords buffed before he put them on. He drove them to the hotel in the F-150 because her car was in the shop, a brake job he had scheduled and paid for without mentioning, the kind of practical, invisible maintenance that had been entirely his domain for 9 years and that she had always taken as a given, the same way she took the packed lunches and the packed backpacks and the notes in the side pocket and the deck he had built while she was in Singapore. The drive took 22 minutes. Cassandra talked about who would be there, about the new VP being honored, about the table assignments she had arranged, and whether she had put the right people next to the right people. Daniel drove. He said the right things at the right intervals. He kept his hands at 10 and 2. He watched the road. He had thought carefully about what the evening needed to be. He was not there to act. He was there to be present, and to be verifiably present, which was not the same thing as acting, but was adjacent to it and served a purpose. He was the attending spouse. He had RSVP'd yes. He would be seen by colleagues and her colleagues and the hotel staff and the parking attendant and whoever managed the sign and table at the entrance. The evening would be documented in the way that evenings are documented. In memory, in the hotel's event records, in the photographs the event planner would take, in the peripheral awareness of 200 people who would see him standing in the ballroom holding a club soda, pleasant and present and entirely unremarkable. They arrived at 6:45 p.m. He took a club soda from a passing server. He found a position he liked near the far wall with a clear sight line across most of the room and talked easily to the people who came to talk to him, Cassandra's colleagues, a project manager named Brian who worked in the same building and who talked for a while about a kitchen renovation he was midway through, a VP named Sandra who had always been pleasant to him and who asked about Lily's soccer season. He watched the room while he talked. It was a professional skill, managing a conversation with most of his attention while directing the remainder somewhere else. He had used it on job sites for 15 years, talking to a county inspector while tracking the progress of a crew across the site. The mechanics were the same. He was present, and he was watching. He saw Garrett Hollis arrive at 7:05 p.m. He recognized him from Ray Colton's file. Tall, mid-40s. The posture of someone who has been told he is impressive often enough to start carrying it in his body. He was with his wife, Patricia. Dark green dress, composed expression, the particular stillness of a woman who has attended many events like this and has learned to manage them gracefully. They separated within 20 minutes, drifting to different clusters the way couples do at professional events where one partner belongs and the other is a guest. At 7:34 p.m., Cassandra excused herself from a conversation near the bar and walked toward the corridor that led to the hotel's east wing. The east wing connected to a smaller lobby with 2 elevators and access to the upper floors. It was not the direction of the women's restroom, which was off the main entrance corridor, which Cassandra knew because she had been to this hotel at least 6 times in the past year. Daniel noted the direction of her movement. He noted the time. He turned back to his conversation with Brian about kitchen tile and said something about grout lines. At 7:36 p.m., Garrett Hollis excused himself from a cluster of senior directors, checked his watch in the manner of a man with a private appointment he does not want to appear to have, and walked toward the same corridor. Daniel set his club soda down on the table beside him. He did not follow. He noted the time in his phone, 7:36 p.m. He was already talking to Sandra, the VP, again about something else. He was entirely present. He tracked the time the way he tracked everything, not obsessively, not constantly, just with the part of his mind that always kept records, that had been keeping records since February, that noted the time the kettle boiled, and the time the concrete cured, and the time the grout dried, and would now note the time his wife came back into the ballroom she had left with a specific destination in mind. At 9:35 p.m., 119 minutes later, Cassandra came back through the main entrance of the ballroom. Her lipstick had been reapplied, a precise, careful reapplication of the exact same shade, the kind that takes a mirror and intention. Her hair was slightly different. The left side, which had been pinned, was now more loosely arranged in a way that might be attributed to natural drift if you were not paying attention, and Daniel had been paying attention to everything for 6 weeks. She moved directly to a cluster of colleagues near the dessert station and inserted herself into the conversation with the ease of someone who had never been anywhere else. At 9:37 p.m., Garrett Hollis came through the same main entrance from a different angle, straightening his jacket lapel with 2 fingers, and went to the bar. Daniel noted it. He noted the time. He took the last sip of his club soda and set the empty glass on a passing server's tray. His face was still. At 10:15 p.m., he drove them home. Cassandra talked about the evening, the VP's speech, a colleague's haircut, a conversation about an upcoming quarterly review. Daniel drove. He said the right things. He parked in the driveway. He went inside with her and helped Lily, who had been next door with Daniel's mother and had fallen asleep on the couch watching television, carry her upstairs without waking her. He tucked the blanket around her small shoulders and placed the stuffed dog under her arm the way she liked it, the left arm, because the dog was her co-pilot and co-pilots sat on the left. He came downstairs. Cassandra had gone to the bedroom. He sat at the kitchen table. He noted the times on his legal pad. 7:34, 7:36, 9:35, 9:37. In the small, precise handwriting he used for everything that needed to be accurate. He closed the pad. He sat for a moment with the kitchen clock ticking and the house settled around him, and Chester, the neighbor's dog who occasionally wandered over through the gate Daniel had never gotten around to fully latching, asleep under the kitchen table against his foot. He did not cry. He had not cried in 6 weeks. He was not going to cry tonight. He turned the legal pad face down and went to bed. At 9:17 the following morning, the phone rang. Cassandra was asleep. Daniel was in the kitchen in work clothes. He had a county drainage brief due the following Tuesday and had been reviewing survey maps at the kitchen table. Since 7, his coffee beside him, the pale morning sun coming through the east window in a long, flat strip across the floor. Lily was at the table eating cereal and narrating a story she was inventing to herself, quietly, in the half-distracted way of a child whose inner world never goes all the way quiet. He answered on the second ring. The caller said, "Is this Daniel Rowe, Cassandra Rowe's husband?" He said, "It is." The caller said, "My name is Patricia Hollis. I believe our spouses know each other." The voice on the other end was controlled, very controlled, the voice of someone who had made this decision before dialing and was not going to let herself unmake it on the call. It was calm in the specific way that calm sounds when it is costing someone something. He recognized the quality. He had been performing the same quality for 6 weeks. He said, "Yes, I know who you are." A pause. "I think we should meet." He looked across the table at Lily, who was entirely absorbed in her bowl and her quiet story, her spoon tracing patterns in the milk. He turned toward the window. He said, "I can be at the Panera on Rhea Road at 11. She said, "I'll be there." He set the phone down. He picked up his pen and wrote on the legal pad, "Patricia Hollis." 11 a.m. He looked at it for a moment. Then, he called his mother. His mother answered on the first ring, as she always did, the early habit of a woman who had raised 2 sons who occasionally needed things. He said he had something he needed to handle this morning, and asked if she could take Lily for a few hours. His mother said, of course, she would come at 10:30, and she did not ask what the something was. She had known him for 38 years. She had learned the difference between a question that would be useful and one that would not. She arrived at 10:30 with a tin of cookies she had made the previous day, oatmeal raisin, Lily's specific preference, and she took Lily's coat off the hook by the door and handed it to her and looked at her son for one brief moment with the eyes of someone who has learned to read him quickly. She said, "Take your time." He said, "Thank you." He kissed Lily on the forehead. He drove to Rhea Road. Patricia Hollis arrived at 10:58. She was the woman in the dark green dress, except stripped of the event context she looked different, not diminished, but human in a way the gala had not permitted. She looked like someone who had not slept and had spent the sleepless hours making a decision she had not wanted to have to make. She sat across from him. She set her purse on the table. She did not order coffee. She said, "How long have you known?" He said, 6 weeks. She absorbed that. She sat with it for a moment. Then she said, "I found out last night." He left his phone on the nightstand. He got a text at 2 in the morning. He told me it was work. A pause. I looked at the text. Daniel said it wasn't work. She said no. She set a folded piece of paper on the table between them. She said, "I went through his work email this morning after he left. He had a hotel invoice in the drafts folder. He'd saved it there instead of the sent folder. March 4th. The Marriott on Fairview." She paused. He thought he'd deleted it. Daniel did not pick up the paper. He said, "I have photographs from that date. Entry at 6:48 p.m., exit at 7:14 the following morning." She looked at him steadily. She said, "What are you planning to do?" He said, "I filed for divorce this morning. Elaine Marsh, 14 floors South Tryon." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to speak to Garrett today. Before anything else moves, I want him to hear it from me first, directly, so there's no question later about what he was told and when." He said, "That's your call to make." She said, "After that, whatever you need from me, I'll provide it." He said, "My attorney may reach out through yours. When you have one, a corroborating declaration could be useful in discovery." She said, "You'll have it." She picked up her purse. She stood. She paused with the table still between them. She said, "She doesn't know what she had." He looked at the window. He said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." She said, "I'm sorry it happened to both of us." She walked out. He sat at the corner table for 15 more minutes, watching the parking lot, the ordinary Saturday traffic of people with ordinary Saturday errands. Then he got up, threw away his cup, and went to get his daughter. He had met with Elaine Marsh the Friday before the gala, at 2:00 p.m. on a day he had told Cassandra he had a county meeting. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building on South Tryon. Organized, document-dense. The office of someone who worked in a space rather than inhabiting it. She was in her early 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a manner that was direct without being brittle. She had gone to Unk Law and had spent over 2 decades handling high-asset family law in Mecklenburg County. The attorneys who faced her in court described her with a consistent term: prepared. Always, and completely prepared in a way that made improvisation on the opposing side very expensive. Daniel had set the binder on her desk. 4 inches, tabbed and indexed across 5 sections. She had looked at the spine before opening it. She read for 11 minutes. When she was done, she set it down. She said, "This is the most complete initial documentation I have received in 22 years of practice." He said, "I had 6 weeks and a methodology." She said, "North Carolina fault divorce. Adultery as grounds. What you have here exceeds the evidentiary threshold by a significant margin." She paused. "The server backup. If forensics confirmation is in Section D?" He said, "Signed letter. Chain of custody documented. Original sync logs attached." She said, "I'll want to speak to your investigator." He said, "Ray Colton. His contact is the last page of Section B. He's expecting your call." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "You've thought about timing." He said, "The gala is in 8 days. I'd like to file after. I want to be there. I want to have been there, in the record." She said, "Understood. We file Thursday after the gala, or sooner if circumstances change." He said, "Sooner if circumstances change." She picked up her pen. She said, "Tell me about the child." He told her about Lily. He was precise. He described her schedule, her school, her soccer team, her teacher, her friends, her routines, her specific preferences and needs, and the way she organized her world. He spoke about Lily the way he spoke about a structural system he was responsible for, with the particular, loving precision of someone who understands every load-bearing element and is not going to let any of it fail. Elaine listened and took notes. When he was done, she said, "Primary physical custody is going to be the central priority." He said, "It's the only priority." She said, "Then, that's where we build." Cassandra found out on a Wednesday evening. Not from Daniel, from a colleague named Rhonda who had heard from HR, who had heard from someone near the directors, that a situation involving Garrett Hollis and a woman at the company was not going to stay quiet. Rhonda had texted Cassandra at 4:15 p.m. with 3 words, "Call me now." Cassandra had called. Whatever Rhonda said in that call came home with Cassandra at 6 p.m. In the particular way information sits in a person's face before they have found a way to put it down. She came through the kitchen door and stood there for a moment. Lily was at the table with a math worksheet. Daniel was at the stove. She said, "Can we talk?" He said, "After dinner." She sat with Lily and went through spelling words while Daniel finished cooking. and they ate with the ordinary sounds of a family at dinner. Lily talking about a rabbit a girl in her class had brought in for show and tell, the scrape of forks on plates, the television news low in the next room. Normal. Entirely normal in the way that things are normal for the last time before they are not. He helped Lily with her bath. He read her 2 chapters of the book they had been working through, a story about a girl who finds a hidden door at the back of her school library. A discovery scene that had been the same cliffhanger for 4 evenings running because Lily kept asking for it reread rather than moving forward. He turned off her light at 8:17. He closed the door. Cassandra was at the kitchen table. She had been sitting there since dinner, her phone on the table, untouched. The kitchen light was on, and the rest of the house was dark around her, and she looked, for a moment, like a photograph of herself rather than the actual person. She said, "I need to explain something." He sat down across from her. He did not say anything. She said, "What happened? I know how it looks. I know it looks terrible." She stopped. She started again, slower. "It wasn't. It was complicated, Daniel. It was," he said. "Cassandra." She stopped. He said, "I filed for divorce this morning." Elaine Marsh, South Tryon. The silence was complete. She did not move. She stared at him in the specific way of someone who has been telling themselves something was not going to happen and has just discovered they were wrong. She said, "You filed." He said, "Thursday was the original plan. We moved it up." She said, "How long?" She stopped. Started again. "How long have you known?" He said, 6 weeks. He watched it move across her face, what 6 weeks meant, what it contained, what he had been doing with it while she was doing what she was doing. The kitchen, the mornings, the gala, the drive there and back, the way he had said the right things at the right intervals. She said, "The gala." He said, "Yes." She said, "You knew at the gala." He said, "I knew before the gala." She said, "Nothing." She looked at her phone. She did not pick it up. He said, "You should call your own attorney tonight. Tomorrow at the latest. Discovery goes out within the week." He pushed his chair back. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room. We'll figure out the arrangements. Nothing changes for Lily until we agree on what to tell her, and we're going to do that together, and carefully. That is not negotiable." He stood. He said, "You wrote that I never notice anything, that I'm just furniture." She went still. The way a person goes still when something they thought was private becomes suddenly and irreversibly not, he said. "I noticed everything. I just waited until I knew what to do with it." He went upstairs. His face was still. Not cold, still. The way still water is still. The way a structure that has been properly built is still under load. Garrett Hollis submitted his resignation from the Harrington Group on the following Friday. The resignation was not publicized, but the conditions that preceded it were known within the company's senior management by Thursday evening, having been made known by Daniel's filing, which contained a discovery request naming the Harrington Group as a relevant party and requesting records of Garrett Hollis's company sanctioned travel and expense reports over the previous 12 months. The managing director and 2 senior partners met with Garrett on Friday morning. The meeting lasted 14 minutes. Garrett collected his items from his office in a banker's box that afternoon. He left through the side exit. His company email was deactivated by 5 p.m. Patricia Hollis had filed her own petition on Thursday, one day after Daniel's, one day after she had spoken to Garrett in a conversation she would describe only once, and to no one except her attorney as the last honest conversation she intended to have with him. Her attorney was James Whitfield, who had handled her family's legal matters for a decade, who had reviewed her documentation on Wednesday evening and described it as more than sufficient, and who had coordinated with Elaine Marsh's office to provide Patricia's signed declaration in support of Daniel's discovery. The declaration covered 3 specific matters: the text thread Patricia had documented from Garrett's phone, a second hotel invoice she located in his personal email, dated February 11th, and a voicemail she had saved from September of the previous year in which Garrett, clearly unaware he had accidentally connected a call, could be heard on speaker saying to Cassandra, with the casual confidence of a man who believes he is speaking in private, "He's never going to figure it out. He doesn't pay attention to anything." Elaine Marsh listened to the voicemail at her desk on a Thursday morning. She said, "I'll have it authenticated by end of day." She paused. "He really said that?" Daniel said, "He really said that." She closed the folder. She said, "Kenneth Price is going to have a difficult month." Kenneth Price was Cassandra's attorney, 16 years in family law, sharp, the kind of practitioner who looked for angles and usually found them. He reviewed the full discovery disclosure, including Patricia's declaration and the authenticated voicemail, in the second week of proceedings. He requested a settlement meeting. The meeting was held on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. in a conference room on the 17th floor of a building on College Street. Long table. Pale birch surface. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city in flat spring light. Daniel arrived at 8:52, 8 minutes early the way he arrived everywhere that mattered. He arranged the folder in front of him. He adjusted his jacket. He was composed and precise and entirely without urgency. Cassandra sat across from him. She looked like the past 4 months had weight, and she had been carrying them. He understood that. He had been carrying the same months, differently. Kenneth Price made a preliminary argument about fault grounds and equitable distribution. Elaine Marsh set a 43-page compiled brief on the table. She had told Daniel what it contained and why each section was where it was, and let it sit. She said, "The grounds are established. The documentation is authenticated and comprehensive. My client's preference is resolution without further proceedings. That preference is time-limited." Price asked for a recess. The recess lasted 38 minutes. The settlement was specific and complete. The house, where Daniel had made the majority of mortgage payments for 7 years, where he had built the deck and tiled the bathroom and installed the kitchen shelving and refinished the window frames in the back bedroom because the old ones were rotting and he did not want Lily breathing condensation, went to Daniel. Cassandra retained her retirement account and a shared investment account. Primary physical custody of Lily went to Daniel. The visitation arrangement was structured around Lily's school schedule, her soccer season, her routines, drafted by Elaine with the particular attention of someone who had been told, in precise and specific terms, that the child was the only priority. Cassandra signed. She looked at the paper when she signed, not at Daniel. Daniel signed. His hand was steady. He capped his pen. In the elevator after, alone for 30 seconds while their attorneys were gathering documents, Cassandra said, "I didn't think you'd fight this hard." He said, "I know." She said, "I thought." He said, "I know what you thought." The doors opened. He walked out. He did not look back. Garrett Hollis was out of work for 7 months. The departure from the Harrington Group had been the kind that leaves a specific gravity in professional networks. No farewell email, no LinkedIn update, no announced transition. People noticed the absence, and then, as people do, found out the reason. And the reason had the shape of something that does not easily become a footnote. He found a position in January at a smaller strategy firm in Raleigh. A step down in title, $34,000 lower in base pay than his previous role, a commute he had not planned for. He and Patricia sold the Ballantine house in November for $612,000 and divided the proceeds per the settlement. He was renting a 2-bedroom apartment near a strip mall in North Raleigh, driving the leased BMW, whose payments he was quietly struggling to make on the reduced salary. The BMW payment was the kind of detail that a man like Garrett, who had built his self-presentation carefully, expensively, over many years, would find more difficult to give up than almost anything else. He kept the car for 3 months after he should have returned it, finding the monthly number in his accounts with the particular wince of someone who was not yet finished grieving the version of himself that had needed that car. Patricia Hollis sold the house and moved into a townhouse in Ballantine, smaller and better suited, and returned to working full-time at the interior design firm she had left 5 years earlier when the children were small. The firm had wanted her back. They were not wrong to. She was good, and she had the additional quality of someone who has recently stripped everything unnecessary from her life and is not interested in acquiring new weight. She was, by any measure that counted, doing well. She had always been the one who kept things running. The running continued. Cassandra kept her position at the Harrington Group. The company had maintained a careful internal distinction. She was the spouse, not the employee, and the situation had been contained at the level where it needed to be contained. She was good at her job. She remained good at it. She saw Lily on Wednesdays and every other weekend, and she was present and careful during those times, in the way of someone who understands that presence and care are now things to be demonstrated rather than assumed. Lily did not ask many questions in the first months. She asked more as time went on, in the specific way that children ask, indirectly, through adjacent subjects, arriving at what they want to know by a route that allows them to retreat if the route becomes uncomfortable. Daniel followed her lead. He always had. Daniel refinished the floors in the main bedroom in November. He had been meaning to do it for 3 years. The original hardwood was wide plank pine underneath the carpet, which he had known since the house inspection, which he had filed in a folder in the home office with every other piece of documentation from the purchase. He rented a drum sander on a Saturday morning. He worked 3 evenings, and the full following Saturday, moving methodically from one wall to the other, the shop vacuum tracking behind him, the respirator fogging his safety glasses in the November cold coming through the window he kept cracked for ventilation. The floors came out better than he had calculated. He stained them in medium walnut. He let them cure for 72 hours with the windows open before he brought the furniture back. He stood in the doorway the morning after, coffee in one hand, and looked at the room in the early light coming through the east window, the way the new floor held the light and gave it back. It was a good room. He had made it a good room, slowly, over time, the way everything worth having is made. Lily had named the beagle Chester. He was 3 years old, adopted from a rescue in Gastonia in September, with a white-tipped tail and the specific competence of a dog who has lived in uncertainty and understood, within 48 hours of arriving at this house, that uncertainty was over. He slept at the foot of Lily's bed and followed Daniel through the house during school hours with the patient loyalty of an animal that has made a decision and does not require it to be revisited. The soccer team finished the fall season in 2nd place, one loss in the semifinals that Lily took seriously, and then absorbed with the equanimity of a 7-year-old who had been coached by the same person for 3 seasons and had internalized, somewhere along the way, the idea that how you handle losing a thing matters as much as the winning. Daniel drove home from the semifinal with her in the back seat, Chester beside her, both of them quiet, and then stopped at her request for ice cream, which he had been going to suggest anyway, but was glad to let be her idea. He sat across from her at a small table by the window of the ice cream shop, watching her work through a scoop of cookies and cream, and she said, "Dad, we tried our best, right?" He said, "We tried our absolute best." She said, "That's what matters." He said, "That's exactly what matters." She went back to the ice cream. Outside the window, the late afternoon was turning orange. The parking lot was quiet. Chester was in the truck, visible through the window, sitting upright in the passenger seat with the authority of a dog who has decided that is his seat. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the evening light. He felt the particular weight that it is not grief and is not relief, but is somewhere in the space between them, where gratitude lives. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. On a Saturday morning in December, he woke at 5:55 a.m. Before the alarm, made 1 cup of pour-over coffee, and sat on the back deck in his flannel jacket with his hands around the mug while the yard came into the gray pre-dawn light. The deck was solid under him. The boards he had measured and cut and sunk himself. The cedar he had chosen because it would outlast him in this yard if properly maintained. The railing he had squared twice before fastening. It did not move. It did not flex. It held because it had been built to hold. He drove home from his mother's house that Sunday evening, with Lily asleep in the back seat. Her head against the window, Chester across her lap in defiance of the seatbelt situation Daniel had not yet found a satisfactory solution to. The city went past the windows. The highway was quiet in the particular Sunday evening way of a city settling back into the week ahead. He drove with the radio low, one hand on the wheel, the familiar weight of the route pulling them home. He turned into the cul-de-sac. He parked in the driveway. He sat with the engine off, listening to the tick of the cooling metal in the quiet of the car, Lily's small breathing from the back seat, Chester's occasional shift of weight. The oak tree at the end of the street was bare now, fully into winter, its branches making clean dark lines against the streetlight. He got out. He opened the back door and lifted his daughter with the practiced ease of someone who has been doing this since she was small enough to fit entirely in the crook of one arm. She stirred and said something indistinct and settled against his shoulder. He carried her inside. He carried her upstairs. He tucked her in. He set the stuffed dog under her left arm, co-pilot position. Chester hopped up in one fluid motion and turned his 3 circles and settled at her feet. He turned off the light. He pulled the door to its usual, not quite closed position. He went downstairs. He stood in the kitchen, in the dark, his hand on the counter, listening to the house around him, the refrigerator hum, the tick of the clock, the specific creaks and settlings of a structure he knew by sound as well as sight, the way you know a thing you have lived inside long enough to understand what it sounds like when it is at rest. He had built this. He had kept it. Those were the same action, done over time. He picked up the legal pad from the counter, the same one he had been using since February, now on its 3rd replacement. The current version filled to its last few pages with items crossed off in clean horizontal lines. He flipped to the last page. He wrote, in the small, precise handwriting he used for everything that needed to be accurate, "Floors done. Deck solid. Chester settled. Lily okay." He looked at it. Then he closed the pad. He went to bed. He did not look back. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.